EmMajority Report with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Thursday, May 2nd, 2024. My name is Emma Vigeland, in for Sam Seder, and this is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, César García Hernández, author of Welcome the Wretched, in defense of the criminal alien. And later in the program, writer Schuyler Mitchell will be with us to talk about Israel's pinkwashing tactics. Also on the program today, at UCLA... Is this song slower than normal? Okay, never mind. Also on the program today, at UCLA, cops fire impact munitions on college kids protesting Israel's genocide, allowing pro-Israel counter-demonstrators to violently attack them as well. Blinken was in Israel yesterday, and despite reports of supposed optimism about a ceasefire, Netanyahu is still insisting on a catastrophic Rafah invasion, where 600,000 children are. Jordan says Israeli settlers are attacking aid trucks again. The country of Colombia announces it will sever diplomatic ties with Israel. It's funny. It's funny time for this Colombia to do that. Right?
Colombia.
Yes. The House's BS anti-Semitism bill, which says that criticizing Israel's anti-Semitic, passes overwhelmingly with only 91 no votes in the House. In Arizona, 2 state Senate Republicans joined all Democrats to repeal the 1864 abortion ban, leaving the 15-week one in place. However, some weird legislative rules means the full ban will still take effect for a short period of time in the summer. In South Dakota, organizers say they have enough signatures to put abortion on the ballot in November. On his day off from his criminal trial, the law and order candidate Trump campaigned in Wisconsin, praising cop raids on pro-Palestine protesters. You know, the criminal defendant law and order candidate. Senate Democrats reintroduce a bill to legalize cannabis. Another Boeing whistleblower has died. He was 45. The NLRB determines Amazon CEO broke labor law by saying employees would be less empowered by joining a union. And lastly, hundreds dead in Kenya after massive floods due to downpours strike the country, and landslides as well, decimating homes. All this and more on today's Majority Report. Welcome to the show, everybody. It is an EmMajority Report Thursday. I am joined now by Bradley and Matt, and later in the program, old Matt and Brandon will be with us. So that will be fun for the fun half. Brandon is with us today, right? So that's good. Yeah. We'll, of course, be talking about what's on all of our minds. And we'll start there as well. So earlier today, so I guess it was, in the early AM hours in California time, the LAPD, wearing riot gear, violently attacked the pro-Palestine encampment at UCLA. They used flashbangs. They fired impact munitions on these kids. That includes rubber bullets. Let's show what a rubber bullet looks like, because it's not as it can really, rubber bullets have killed people, and rubber bullets are extremely painful when fired on you. This is Lee Hurley from Ireland. Hello from Northern Ireland, where the Brits love to use rubber bullets. Rubber bullets kill. This is what a rubber bullet looks like. Now imagine that fired at you from a gun. And if you're listening on the podcast audience, you can see that these rubber bullets are as large as a human being's hand, if not bigger. So they're significant. And the footage of that getting fired on these kids who were just standing against genocide was horrifying.
It's fascism.
Yeah. And it really undercuts the democracy is under attack kind of theme from Biden's campaign.
This is Project 2024. The whole anti-Semitism is criticism of Israel bullshit. This is all fascism in our country right now, and it does not matter who is in the White House about it.
Well, I mean, isn't that the kind of the saying about liberals? If you scratch a little bit and there's a fascist underneath.
Yeah, I mean, they don't care about it except as a way to campaign on.
It's really, I think, an education, too, for a lot of young people in Gen Z. These kids who are so brave and are insisting that stop making it about the campus protests. Listen to what we're saying about divestment and listen to what we're saying about this genocide ahead of a potentially catastrophic Rafah ground invasion, which they've already been bombing, by the way. But over 1 million Palestinians are displaced there, and the UN estimates that 600,000 children are in Rafah. Just to give you a sense of what that slaughter would look like. But in terms of what happened early this morning at UCLA, The Guardian writes, footage showed mostly male counter-demonstrators, many of them masked, and some apparently older than the students. I saw women as young as 18 and 19 punched in the face by 25 or 30-year-old men, Aidan Doyle, a member of the student encampment, said at a student press conference on Wednesday. Students described being attacked for hours with projectiles, fireworks, and chemical agents. A young woman in a hijab described being sprayed in the face with bear mace. A student who identified himself only as Yusuf said at the press conference that he had been hit in the head twice during the attack on the encampment and was left with stitches on his forehead and 14 staples in the back of his head. But Yusuf said he felt comparatively lucky. I had the ability to go to a hospital last night. Currently in Gaza, there are 0 fully functioning hospitals. I mean, these young people are remarkable and on the right side of history.
It's the night after Zionists attacked them too. Fascist brown shirt Zionists attack the same encampment, and now cops do it. It's the same. This is fascism. This is, I mean, as the living memory of fascism recedes, Zionism will take its place, and it's going to be the new thing that we all realize is completely against humanity years down the line, and we will defeat this the same way fascism was defeated. And
the propaganda to protect this is really in overtime, right? Doing overtime right now. That's a little bit of a
doing overtime. What, like, are they on Candy Crush?
Right, that's what I'm saying. Time and a half to stand in the subway station or crack the skull of kids standing up to one of the worst crimes against humanity that we will ever live through. So, like, the media is just constantly misrepresenting the level of danger presented by these protesters, which is 0. It's the provocateurs, these pro-Israel Zionists, people who are going in there with the explicit purpose of creating violence and sowing discontent, and then the national press will be like, oh my gosh, these are not peaceful protests. Well, who are the people creating lack of peace? And by the way, peace, that's what liberals and conservatives desire. We want justice.
It's insincere. The idea that vandalism is all of a sudden the thing that the issue. No, these fascists were looking for a license. Rabbi Soav was talking about them being anti-Jewish days before because they couldn't actually point to any sort of vandalism because all they're looking for is a license to put this down. Like all the talk about, was it outside agitators? Oh, guess what? Those were all students. So what were you even talking about outside agitators for? And is it okay now that they're all students? No, you still want them arrested because you're a fascist and you would have want the people occupying the lunch counters to be arrested. You are fascists.
Well, speaking of those outside agitator claims, this is Mayor Eric Adams when asked about that specific accusation. And the outside agitator, because obviously the images out of the Columbia protest will be in history books for centuries to come. But this outside agitator myth, one, it's made to make it seem like these are inorganic and the kids don't have a justification for what they're doing. But outside agitators, I saw Astra Taylor had this great point. it's a way to undercut movements because solidarity from the outside is essential for these children, these not children, but young people right now. And this is Eric Adams being asked about his claims that outside agitators are at these Columbia demonstrations, and he really can't come up with anything.
By all of this, but we've heard from your team that there are these nameless leaders who were involved. Can you tell us who they were, or at least how many of them there are?
Well, first, I always suspected that something was happening, and I'm happy that the confirmation of my suspicion turned out to be accurate when our intelligence division briefed me on two particular individuals. One of them, husband, was arrested for terrorism as well. Some of the paraphernalia and pamphlets that we saw, individuals we saw who were not CUNY students, were there training individuals. We saw the escalation of the tactics that were being used. And so it has been reported on some of the individuals that just stated. I choose not to give notoriety to people who participate in activities like that, but it has been online. The police department has reported, and I'm sure if you reach out to the intelligence division, they'll give you based on the information we want to release. And this is extremely active, continue to evolve.
Sorry, pause. I don't know how much more you want to go on this, but that will be the information we want to believe is a fun Freudian sleep for receipt or release.
Yeah, right. There's 4 more seconds. We'll let him finish. No, it's okay.
Continue to do the thorough investigations that we have been doing.
Okay, very thorough. So
Boink.
The person that one of the people that he references most specifically there, this is the obviously the communists over at the Associated Press. Jake Offenhartz, who is a New York City-based reporter for the APM, obviously being tongue-in-cheek, says, for the 4th time today, Adams describes Nala al-Aryan as an outside agitator, this time in response to a question about the nameless leaders he claims are behind the protest. Her actual role, stopping by the encampment with her daughters last week.
Yeah, and I will just say Jake Offenhartz has been doing good reporting, so there's not a whole lot of people out there, especially for big organizations, so follow Jake.
Yeah, good job, Jake at the AP. That he could barely come up with anything there.
Because it was insincere. It was a lie the whole time, and they knew it.
Yeah, and then here's another lie. This is the NYPD deputy commissioner going on Morning Joe, which is Biden's favorite show. He watches it religiously, and he's talking here about some of the tactics that they're being used by these students and who's funding them. We'll have an answer for you after this.
Right.
Tell us about this change.
Yeah, so when we entered Hamilton Hall, this is not what students bring to school. Okay, this is what professionals bring to campuses and universities. These are heavy industrial chains that were locked with bike locks, and this is what we encountered on every door inside of Hamilton Hall. And so in order for our emergency services group to enter into the building, they had to first cut through these chains, but also get rid of debris and barricaded doors that were barricaded with refrigerators, vending machines, chairs, you name it. Awesome. They pushed it up against those doors to try and stop us from coming in. But our guys would not be stopped. They did a fantastic job of entering into that location and taking people into custody without incident last night. They took about 40 to 50 people into custody inside of the lobby of Hamilton Hall last night. Right.
Tell us about this.
So that scary bike lock.
The Hamas chain.
Right.
They make those at the foundry in Gaza.
Why do all the tents look the same? Too. Well, it's like a kid maybe ordered them in bulk off Amazon or something like that. And these scary bike locks, wow, look at the Columbia University Hamas headquarters.
Hamas has infiltrated Columbia University Public Safety with special terrorism locks.
Yeah, so Arik Toller, who works at the Times, says that this bike lock is and was available for sale on campus via Columbia's Public Safety Department under their crime prevention discount bike locker and laptop.
It is the most expensive one here, the Kryptonite New York series. In fact, weird. It's not the Kryptonite Gaza or Kryptonite Intifada series. It's the But
you can see there's a sleeve on the chain there, and there wasn't when he put that very heavy chain onto the morning desk
That's the special thing that makes us dangerous.
The Morning Joe desk, yeah, right. Yeah. So we know exactly what this is.
Yeah, this is Colin Powell holding up an anthrax vial saying we got to kill 100,000 Iraqis. This is the same thing.
They're incredibly frustrated by the effectiveness of these demonstrations. And this coverage on MSNBC, this supposed liberal news outlet, is completely out of whack with public opinion, let alone Democrats. I mean, over 75% of Democrats disapprove of Israel's actions in Gaza, and there hasn't been specific polling about support for these demonstrations. I don't know if it would be as strong, just given the fact that people see discord and they generally get kind of what were you saying?
They're being lied to about it by Zionists and media like Mika Brzezinski and Joe Scarborough.
Right. They generally, people don't support protests in the way that I think that they should. But in terms of support for Israel, like the level of support disapproval from Democrats is overwhelming. And the last major poll that was done on by Gallup found a massive shift in public opinion, and that disapproval of Israel's actions is the majority opinion at 55%. And approval had dropped from November to March from 50 to 36%. Yeah. So the point is just that who is this for, right? This is just an appeal to power, because the American public, this is only going to continue to go down this road as people begin to educate themselves about Palestine and about Israel.
The college Democrats said, hey, our votes aren't to be taken for granted. Official college Democrats never make statements like that.
Oh, yeah. Please. I was in high school Democrats and a little bit involved in college Democrats, but my politics got a bit better then. It's as establishment as it gets. Biden's remarks, we didn't have an opportunity to really watch them because they happened right before the show, but it appears to echo something similar to this.
Sputtering brain dead moron.
Yeah, this disconnect is between public opinion and the way that the corporate press like this is covering this is staggering. And they are just immensely frustrated at how good these kids are at protesting, how they learn so many lessons from Occupy. Like, we're going to have a spokesperson and not have you talk to some random person who may say something that you can grab and smear the whole movement with. They have hierarchies. They are militant. They are clear in their demands as well. And Jewish students are also overrepresented in these demonstrations as well and encampments. So they're looking for anything, and they will fail. They will fail. It's just how many Palestinians will starve to death. Will the Rafah invasion, will that be allowed to happen? We can't allow it. How many will die as we pretend that it's like kids getting brainwashed by TikTok? Time is of the essence. And so don't waste your time on any of these distractions about policing, both literally and with their language, the actions by these righteous kids. All right, folks, we're going to take a break in a second, but first we have a word from our sponsors. Did you know that Fast Growing Trees is the biggest online nursery in the United States with more than 10,000 different kinds of plants and over 2 million happy customers in the U.S.? They have everything you could possibly want, like fruit trees, palm trees, evergreens, houseplants, and so much more. Whatever you're interested in, they have it for you. Find the perfect fit for your climate and space. Fast Growing Trees makes it easy to order online, and your plants are shipped directly to your door in 1 to 2 days. And along with their 30-day Alive and Thrive guarantee, they offer free plant consultation forever. Now, I don't have a very green thumb, but I do like to have some life in my apartment, so I have a house plant from Fast Growing Trees, and they shipped it right to me, and it was really easy for me to pot it and put, I followed the instructions with their care, and it's going strong on my bookshelf. But Sam is just like Fast Growing Trees for everything. I mean, he's got fruit trees, he's got those bloomerangs, he swears by it. And they're not faster growing. They're just, they come a little bit more further down the line, so you can have the fruits of your tree and see the growth in your tree a little bit earlier.
Pre-grown.
You don't need to have a yard or a lot of space. You can grow lemon, avocado, olive, or fig trees inside your home on top of the wide variety of houseplants available. The experts at Fast Growing Trees curate thousands of plants so you can find the perfect fit for your specific climate, location, and needs. You don't have to drive around to nurseries and big gardening centers. Fast Growing Trees makes it easy to order online, and your plants are shipped to your door in 1 to 2 days. Whether you're looking to add some privacy, shade, or natural beauty to your yard, Fast Growing Trees has in-house experts ready to help you make the right selection with growing and care advice available 24/7. You can talk to a plant expert about your soil type, landscape design, how to take care of your plants, and everything else you need. No green thumb required. This spring, they have the best deals online, up to half off select plants and other deals. And listeners to our show can get an additional 15% off their first purchase when using the code MAJORITY at checkout. That's an additional 15% off at fastgrowingtrees.com using code MAJORITY at checkout. Fastgrowingtrees.com, code MAJORITY. Offer is valid for a limited time. Terms and conditions may apply. And lastly, everybody knows I'm a big cashew fan. This is well established on this program. And
lore.
It is. It's got. I have achieved that. My cashew fixation has achieved that status. I do think that that's true. And then my go-to for my cashew fix, nuts.com. Please join me in thanking nuts.com for supporting the Majority Report. Right now, when you go to nuts.com/majority, new customers get a free gift with purchase and free shipping on orders of $29 or more. Nuts.com is your one-stop shop for freshly roasted nuts, dried fruits, sweets, pantry staples like specialty flours, and more. Their wide selection means there is something for everyone. Nuts.com offers plenty of gluten-free options, organic choices, and other diet-friendly products. Whether you're looking for something sweet, savory, or need to stock up on everyday cooking essentials, you're bound to find something to try. At Nuts.com, quality is a top priority. They roast their nuts and pop their corn the same day it ships, so they reach you deliciously fresh. Satisfaction is guaranteed. Shop a la carte at any time or opt into hassle-free auto deliveries so you never run out of your favorite items. And if you're already stocked up at home, they also sell directly to businesses and have a bunch of great gift options. Right now, Nuts.com is offering new customers a free gift with purchase and free shipping on orders of $29 or more. Nuts.com/majority. So go check out all their delicious options at nuts.com/majority. You'll receive a free gift and free shipping when you spend $29 or more. That's nuts.com/majority. All right, guys, quick break, and then we'll be right back. We are back, and we are joined now by César García Hernández, Gregory H. Williams Chair of Civil Rights and Civil Liberties at The Ohio State University Moritz College of Law, immigration lawyer, author of Welcome the Wretched in Defense of the Criminal Alien. César, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
It's my pleasure to be here, Emma.
So, you've talked about this, and I never thought of it this way. The idea that migrants in the United States are either portrayed as criminals. I mean, I've thought about that part, right, by the Republicans and by reactionaries, and honestly, some Democrats too, but also then as victims, right, by other members of the political class. And your book seeks to portray them as people. Why did you choose to kind of take that perspective?
Well, the book Welcome the Wretched seeks to portray migrants as the whole people that they are. They are always people, no matter how often politicians like to dehumanize or to simplify their lives. They're full of complexities, they're full of contradictions, and in that sense, they're exactly the same as U.S. citizens, and that's the point of the book. It doesn't matter that our flaws and our imperfections are not a result of what country we are born in or where it is that we identify ourselves as citizens of, but in fact, but instead are a result of of the fact that all of us will inevitably mess up, even though most of us spend most of our days trying to do right by the people around us and trying to rise to our better versions of ourselves.
Right, and I mean this kind of trope about criminals, migrants as criminals, right? It's replaced more old school racism that, you know, maybe would have come in the form of slurs back in the day when, say, you know, Italians or Jewish people were discriminated against by our immigration system. Now it's just, oh, they're bringing crime. Can you talk a bit about that transition from those, you know, identifiable racist tropes to now this one that we're living through at this moment?
Yeah, there was a very a sizable shift that happened starting in the middle of the 1980s when the Reagan administration started to develop and trying to sell to the nation a war on drugs specifically and as part of that political goal and as part of the push to get law enforcement officials behind the Reagan administration's decision to target illicit drug activity, we started to talk about migrants as being the source of those problems that the Reagan administration was locating in big cities around the United States. Those drugs had to come from somewhere. It was the idea, and they were coming from places in South America and the Caribbean. They were being brought to the United States by migrants, by people whose principal goal, if not their only reason for coming to the United States, was to engage in illegal activity, in criminal activity. In that sense, it's not all that different from some of the rhetoric that we hear from politicians today. But it did catch on in the 1980s with Republicans, and then in the 1990s under the Clinton administration, when and among fairly influential members of the Democratic Party in Congress, including folks like then Senator Joe Biden, who of course now occupies the White House.
And echoes that very similar rhetoric. I mean, even Obama's approach when trying to tackle immigration as president was about basically his deportations targeting criminals and not law-abiding people. What's your assessment of Obama's role in this kind of just swell of treating migration as a criminal problem?
President Obama famously announced in 2014 that his administration was going to revamp immigration policy, and it was targeting, as he put it, felons, not families. He went on to say, we're going to go after gang members, not the mother who's trying to get her kids to school. As if, of course, felons are not parts of families, and families do not include felons, right? As if people exist in these binaries. You're either good or you're bad. You're fit for life in the United States because you avoid crime. But if you engage in criminal activity, then you have no right to remain in this country. When of course we don't have to look far beyond our families and friend networks, the latest news stories, to know that our country is full of people whose activities run the gamut, from the best versions of themselves to the worst versions of themselves. And I think the President Obama has been true of Democratic administrations, presidential administrations, going back to the 1990s, is very much wrapped themselves in the idea that one run-in with the criminal legal system is one too many, and that in the political triangulation of immigration politics, it makes sense to sell the targeting of migrants who have criminal activity on their records as being the chip that is going to woo voters or woo Republicans to the negotiation table, And at least when it comes to Republicans in Washington, we've seen time and time again that no matter how much Democrats are willing to move in their direction, Republicans are pretty steadfast in their unwillingness to go along with them.
Well, to me, it's this kind of weaponization of the law or the legal system as a disciplinary tool for people who employ undocumented folks, right? Where it's essentially like you can use this looming threat of deportation in order to keep your workers quiet in some instances. And we know that Republicans represent capitalists, bosses, people who enjoy having that point of leverage, honestly, on some employees.
Yeah, but I think this is something that we have to remember. Democrats are also supportive of the very law that created the federal government's power to decide who gets to work in the United States and who doesn't. That comes to us from 1986 when Reagan was president. It was a product of an important political compromise in which Republicans got those employer sanctions. But Democrats got a pretty wide-reaching amnesty component to that law. And these days, there's some wiggle room in that law that Democratic or that activists are trying to push Democratic-led states and cities to tap, because that law explicitly says that it applies to private employers and it applies to federal government agencies, barring those two from hiring people who don't have the federal government's permission to work in the United States. But it says nothing about whether it applies to states and local governments. And folks in California are trying to push the UC system. Folks in Denver are trying to push the city to hire migrants who have no work authorization from the United States as a way of helping those communities bring into the fold and into the labor market some of the folks who have arrived in recent months, courtesy of this busing program that Greg Abbott in Texas has been leading for many months now.
You wrote about how in the 1970s Congress passed a law restoring Robert E. Lee's full citizenship. And that is a contrast to basically saying we don't want criminals in this country to be citizens. Can you just talk to our audience about that contrast a bit?
Yeah, when Congress realized that Robert E. Lee had never been fully pardoned after leading the military insurrection that tried to destroy literally the United States of America. In the 1970s, Congress says, well, we can do something about it. We can restore his U.S. citizenship.
Posthumously.
And they absolutely can. Legally, they have every power to do that. But on the House floor, one member of Congress from Virginia, a guy named Caldwell Butler, says, well, if Robert E. Lee is not fit for U.S. citizenship, then who is? That was apparently a serious question that he was at. Well, everyone who's claim to fame isn't trying to destroy the United States in the most literal sense, right? Whose life accomplishments don't involve a war that leads to the death of 750,000 people. Right? And so Welcome the Wretched is I'm making the point that, look, if people go about their lives in very ordinary ways, unremarkable ways most of the time, and most of that, we stay out of trouble and we mind our own business and we try to go to work and live with our families to the best of our abilities. But inevitably, we all mess up. Inevitably, we all fail. And sometimes the folks who we hurt most poignantly are the folks who are closest to us, the people who we're most intimate with. And sometimes those failures actually rise to the level of being criminal activities. And yet the United States of America is a country that is nothing if not full of deviants and misfits from day one to to this very day. Right? And that's part of what enlivens our culture. Right? That's part of what makes our economy so robust, what makes our communities so vibrant, and part of the source of strength in our past, and I very much hope so into the future as well. And so we ought not to be pretending that to be a U.S. citizen means to be free from those imperfections, free from those flaws. When any one of us can look around, and we don't have to see who's on trial in New York, right, to know that there are U.S. citizens all over this country whose failures, may need to be remedied, but that doesn't mean that we have to cast them off as if our country is too frail to welcome folks whose imperfections stem from their very humanity rather than from whatever country it is that they were born in.
Right, and you use this phrase in your book, how I think it seemed a little tongue-in-cheek, right? That we turn to the cold neutrality of crime, basically to justify keeping certain people out of this country. Can you talk about how we should reimagine crime and denaturalize it a bit? Because these are a series of choices that we make as a government and as a society that don't come from God. We've made these decisions to structure our immigration policy in particular in this way. And when you trace it back, it really is just an extension of racist exclusionary politics from before. Just now people think that they have a legal justification for their preconceived notions.
Whether you have a faith tradition or not, whatever your faith tradition is, we can all agree that we did not find the United States Code, the federal penal code, or the state penal codes on a mountaintop someplace. We just created those, and we created those out of that messy cauldron of that is the political process. The war on drugs was very much spurred by the Reagan administration's desire to woo Southern white people into its fold, into the Republican Party's fold. And when we look at immigration specifically, the crimes that these days, year after year, constitute among the most heavily prosecuted crimes in the U.S. In the federal district court system nationwide are crimes called illegal entry and illegal re-entry. They're basically two crimes that target folks who come into the United States without the federal government's permission. They were prosecuted under Obama, under Trump, under Biden, and these crimes were born in the 1920s out of that really blatantly racist period in which members of Congress openly targeted first Southern and Eastern Europeans in 1921 and 1924, and then they turned their attention to targeting Mexicans. And the idea was that these weren't folks who were racially categorized as not white in that moment of time, and who were thought by leading members of Congress to be unfit for life in the United States. And these two crimes that were enacted in 1929, they're still on the books today, and they're not some afterthought criminal offense. They are being prosecuted every single day in federal courthouses around the United States, and as a result, people are being criminalized formally through the federal court system for coming into the United States without the federal government's permission. And after that happens, of course, there's the possibility of punishment and then deportation after that.
And the idea of crossing the border as a criminal act, can you tell us a little bit about the history of how that got criminalized, and maybe just to give us that context so we can reimagine it going forward?
In the 1920s, there was a strong anti-immigrant contingent within Congress that was successful in enacting quotas that really limited how many folks could come into the United States from anywhere outside of Northern and Western Europe. It really had already successfully cut off most migration from Asia, and then really targeted in the 20s folks from places like Italy and Eastern Europe.
And we should also say that the U.S. was turning boats away, not too long after that,
That's right.
to Jews who were fleeing the Nazis. Keep going.
And that the legal power that the federal government used during the Nazi rise to power and during World War II to block Jewish refugees who got as close to Miami as being able to see the lights on the shore was the power that was granted to them by these quotas that were enacted in 1921 and 1924. But neither of those was able to target Mexicans, and they weren't able to target Mexicans not because members of Congress who were rabidly racist against Italians, for example, or against Jews, for example, liked Mexicans. It was simply because they didn't have the votes. They didn't have the votes because agricultural interests along the Southwest and the West were simply too strong. To allow repeated attempts to target Mexicans, Mexican migration into law, but that changed in the late 1920s when a guy from South Carolina named Coleman Livingston Blease, who was a white supremacist. This was a politician who's made his name by celebrating lynching. When he was governor of South Carolina, he was so vocally supportive of lynching, that other governors from the South actually asked him to tone it down because he was giving them a bad name. And yet he used that open white supremacist ideology to eventually land in the U.S. Senate, and there he teams up with some of these folks who had already learned how to enact restrictive immigration legislation, and they're finally able to gather the votes necessary to 1929 enact a bill that introduces into law for the very first time, or creates in federal law for the very first time, the crimes of entering the United States without the federal government's permission, and that specifically is supposed to be targeting Mexicans and Mexicans today, almost a century later, who are the principal targets of those laws, and then beyond that, some other folks from other parts of Latin America.
And then how did criminalization of cannabis, deemed the scarier and more Mexican-sounding marijuana at this time, play into this as well?
This was all part of this anti-Mexican hysteria. Right? The idea was that Mexicans were debased, culturally inferior, inherently, innately lazy, and very, very, very much tying them to the similar depictions of enslaved individuals just a generation or so before then. And so the decision to target cannabis and marijuana in particular was very much tied up with this inferiority, this depiction of Mexicans as inferior, and as a result, should be punished through whatever means were available, whether that was the criminal legal system for that could tap their use of marijuana, or it was the federal criminal courts that could tap the fact that they had entered the United States without the government's permission. But of course, what we all know is that those powers were turned off and on based on commercial interests, based on business interests. So when growers wanted cheap labor to pick their crops, the Border Patrol simply turned the other way. Sometimes they actually participated in helping Mexicans get across the border and get directly to the places where their labor was needed. But once those laws were in effect, then whenever they wanted to turn them on and get rid of Mexicans, specifically in the early years of the Depression, they could do so. One time we needed more labor when the World War II started, of course, the U.S. turns to the Mexican government and says, hey, how about we partner? How about we team up and have some Mexicans come into the United States as temporary workers, because so many of our young people, our working age residents, are heading off to Europe and to Asia to go fight.
Well, really fascinating stuff. The book is called Welcome the Wretched, In Defense of the Criminal Alien, in quotes. César, thanks so much for coming on the show today. We'll put a link to your book wherever people are listening to or watching this and at majority.fm.
My pleasure.
All right, guys, quick break. And when we come back, we will be joined by Schuyler Mitchell. We are back, and we are joined now by Schuyler Mitchell, former editor at The Intercept, writer based in Brooklyn, whose piece in the Baffler is entitled Pinkwashing the Timeline. Schuyler, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm looking forward to talking.
Yeah, so I'm glad that you wrote this piece, because this is, a typical thing, an argument that you hear from supporters of Israel, that Israel's so LGBTQ friendly, and the savages on the other side, I mean, they're Muslims, so just think about it for a second. And you articulate how that kind of propaganda effort plays out. But let's just start with the term pinkwashing. What is it, and how does Zionists supporting Israel engage in it?
Yeah, so pinkwashing is the deliberate strategy of using a cloak of liberal values, LGBTQ tolerance, to shroud Israeli human rights abuses committed against Palestinians. So, in the wake of October 7th, what this has looked like, pinkwashing is not new, but it has been playing out on social media as, expressions like Queers for Palestine, or expressions of LGBTQ support for the Palestinian people have been derided as naive or contradictory, and it's essentially kind of throwing queer people under the bus in the name of propping up Israel as this bastion of tolerance in the Middle East, as if Israel's acceptance of LGBTQ people is somehow legitimizes its current military campaign.
Right, and it's been used even before this military campaign, as you say, to talk about how Israel is somehow this liberal bastion, when I would argue that there's human rights not being respected kind of undercuts maybe that claim. Now, you cite this sketch in your piece we're going to play a second of it so people get a sense. This is from November, even though it is about Columbia students. I guess this was before of course it was before the encampment, but I forget what action Columbia students took that prompted this. What were they doing in November? I'm forgetting.
There were arrests in November. Columbia students, SGP and face
Right.
and JVP face sanctions. There were all these protests. I mean, this has been going on for months now. So, and yeah, I wrote this.
They
piece
suspended SJP and Jewish Voice for Peace, I believe, at the or they were targeted, something to that effect. I guess the specifics aren't that important. But this Israeli TV channel, which is, I guess, their kind of SNL equivalent, and Brett Gelman participated in this as well, but not in this sketch. Did this I guess satirical sketch about college students in this country, and a lot of what you're describing is on display here. We're gonna play it in just a second.
Hi everyone, we are live on YouTube with Columbia Anti-Semitic News, where everyone is welcome. LGBTQH.
H?
Hamas.
Yeah, I totally sim Hamas.
Yeah.
It's so trending right now.
From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. Do you know why it's true? Because it rhymes. Just look at all this toxic Zionist propaganda. Kidnapped in Gaza. Does this look like Gaza to you?
Yeah.
All right, I think we got the gist. I think we got the gist. They do at one point talk. It's horrible. They do at one point talk about queer people, I guess. But that's just kind of a good example of, I think, the their attempts to satirize or say that in some way kids standing up for Palestine are contradicting themselves in some way, but really it's just like an extension of their portrayal of themselves as victims all the time and staving off the savages on the other side of the wall. If you could just explain that a bit more.
Yeah. So, I mean, when I saw that video, which went viral back in November, one of the things, that stood out to me was, so I think they said in that clip, we support LGBTQH with the
Right,
H
Hamas.
being for Hamas. And then, one of the students later on says, I majored in queer post-colonial astrology, and they wave a rainbow pride flag that has the Palestinian flag in its center, sort of a composite flag. And then they, do a video call with a member of Hamas, and they're like, "We love you so much." And the Hamas militant is like, "If you come to Gaza, I'll throw you from the roof." Right. So it's very emblematic of the prevailing rhetoric, particularly, in the past few months. And what was interesting to me was that it used, like you said, Eretz Nehederet is considered like a liberal program in Israel. They critique Netanyahu's administration in their Hebrew language sketches, but in their English language sketches, which it's worth noting, they're doing them in English to reach a Western audience and they're focusing on YouTube. And it's very, it's a concerted effort to reach the West because, they've said, the writers of the show have said that this is an existential battle for the soul of the nation and that they just need to do their part. And so it's interesting that what doing that part looks like is focusing on American college students and then also kind of invoking these tropes that you usually see on like Fox News or right-wing programs, which is, the expression like, of course you have blue hair and pronouns, this idea that, they literally have blue hair in this sketch, the idea that leftists like look funny and are obsessed with pronouns and are obsessed with queer theory. These are tropes we see all the time. And to see that then used and conflated with loving Hamas was also really interesting, and something that I touch on in the piece of, this victimization where not only are Israel's supporters and Israel, being victimized by Hamas, but also, these queer students. And this isn't the only sketch. There's at least one other one that does a similar thing. So that was something I was just really interested in and wrote about in the piece.
Well, it's amazing to see that the program considers itself, I guess, liberal, right? Because we've spoken about this inherent contradiction of you can't be liberal in a settler colonial society, and but its attempts to appeal to the West kind of hinge on these themes of liberal democracy, and again, it can't be a democracy when you rule over millions of people and don't give them a voice. But like that is the portrayal of Israel that they want the West to absorb, and it's just fascinating because like these liberal college students, they're also a part of the West. Like there are Democrats that you're supposedly trying to appeal to with this Hasbara, but it's not. It's working. It's getting diminishing returns. It's just that this was even before October 7th, something that was at the forefront of how Israel tried to portray itself.
Yeah, definitely. And I think what's interesting is there's also this contradiction where there's a lot of contempt for these queer students,
Right.
you know, and other posts on social media, you know, making fun of expressions like Queers for Palestine by saying it's, you know, it's like saying we're chickens and we love KFC, or there's just a lot of hatred, I think, that's being misdirected at, you know, queer people or, you know, Queers for Palestine. And that is itself, yeah, the contradiction, right? If you're saying that we're liberal and we're tolerant, but then, you know, why this focus on, you know, people thousands of miles away that, you know, are not actually, I mean, there was actually a tweet that I saw in the last 24 hours that was like, it's funny how, you know, the blue-haired social justice lawyer has gone from being a Fox News trope to being literally Hamas. Like, and we've seen that rhetoric crop up again in the latest, you know, police raids on college campuses. Like this idea that these students are not just speaking out in support of, you know, oppressed people, but that they're literally agents of
terrorists.
Hamas.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And you also see this is parallel propaganda, the pinkwashing, to when women like myself, or maybe you, I don't want to speak for you, Schyler, but when people say like, well, you just go to Gaza and you'll get raped there. You would get raped there. And it's just like, oh, would I really? Because in the end, it just is like all of the oldest racist tropes in the book about how people of this skin color are going to go after your women. They don't respect your femininity, that they don't respect queer and gay people there. When you actually talk to Palestinians, it's societies have their own contradictions and bigotries, right? But there's nothing inherently anti-women or anti-LGBTQ in Gaza. It's just really a part of a carefully constructed project against, honestly, Muslims, propaganda project.
And I think, you know, the point that something I write in my piece is that there's no freedom for the dead. So, you know, if you support women's rights, if you support LGBTQ rights, you're not bringing liberation to people by killing them. That's just like a very basic, you know, material contradiction. And, you know, there was this real emblem of that in a social media post by an Israeli soldier where he's standing in the rubble of a Gaza city holding a pride flag. And the pride flag says, in the name of love. And it's like, you know, you can't liberate people these people are being bombed, they're being killed, there's a genocide happening. So yeah, so even, you know, whatever truths, you know, exist about, you know, homophobia or misogyny, like bombing them isn't going to change that either. So
right.
on a whole other level, in addition to it being an Islamophobic, you know, trope. So.
And I mean, this is also a part of, I think you'll see this consistently, and it's a good alarm bell if you're hearing a right-wing argument where it's a portrayal of victimhood that is completely disconnected from material realities. I mean, there's no reality in which Israel is the victim here or is the David and the Goliath story. They are the top recipient of military aid from the most powerful country in the world. They have a nuke. They have the most advanced technology available. But that is something that you will often hear from right-wingers trying to justify atrocities, is that they're the ones who are actually victimized.
Right, yeah. And, you know, my piece, it talks about, I cite this journal article by this political scientist named Heike Schoten, who wrote a piece that was published in 2022 in Transgender Studies Quarterly that talks about extinction phobia. So this idea that this is a hallmark of ethno-nationalist regimes where the minority population is being cast as the real threat, that the minority population has the power to oppress, the people that are actually in power, and that they also have this eliminationist intent. Like, not only do you cast your political opponent as savage or threatening and evil, but also that they are literally trying to erase you, because that is something, once you create that construction, that like solidifies the national identity
and justifies
in
anything.
opposition to that.
And justifies anything.
Exactly.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. And so in the United States, like with white nationalism, we've also seen that, with far right people talking about, the migrants coming over the border, that they're threatening the American way of life. And that also working in tandem with this, the wave of transphobia, this fear mongering about trans people are literally trying to sterilize our children and like wipe out, a portion of the population. All these things are very insidious.
Well, the piece is called Pinkwashing the Timeline. Schuyler Mitchell, we will put a link to it in the description wherever people are listening to it or watching this. It's on the Baffler. Thanks so much for your time today. Really appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me.
Of course. All right, guys. With that, we're going to wrap up the free portion of this program and head into the fun half where we will take your calls, read your IMs. Binder will be with us. I know he's got some thoughts on particularly the NYPD response to Columbia and the other colleges, city colleges too. So we'll be talking to him about that. On ESVN, we spoke about the playoffs as they talked about every single series in the NBA and NHL playoffs. And we also gave our thoughts on the NFL draft, particularly the Michael Penix and Drake May picks. So youtube.com/ESVN show. Matt, what's happening on Left Reckoning?
Oh, yeah, Left Reckoning. We had Hollywood Danny Bessner on to talk about his piece in Harper's Magazine about Hollywood. And Brandon, can you hear us? I just want to make sure you're...
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
No, that was just his blank stare is just his normal resting face.
I just didn't want to... Like, if he was like surfing the internet, not knowing he was being broadcast.
Yes.
Oh, no, I don't mind at all.
We talked about that. We talked about Joe Rogan, who thinks it's over for us when we can get AI sex robots and what is, I think, as R.M. Brown called, a self-report. Vivek Ramaswamy talking about how in the afterlife we are going to have to answer to people like Thomas Jefferson and Benjamin Franklin. And what are we going to say about what we did to stop wokeness or whatever? So, patreon.com/Left Reckoning. We had a fun post-game show.
Awesome.
All I can say is I hope they don't start rapping. Like, after seeing Hamilton, I'm just expecting every founding father to rap in heaven when I meet them. So I'm just, as long as they don't start like giving me some hot bars, like an epic rap battle of history, it'll be fine.
God. Yeah, that's what they've been doing is just going to Hamilton shows as ghosts because they love it so much.
Right. Well, it's an inaccurate and flattering portrayal, so that would flatter their sensibilities, I'd imagine. Go on, Brandon.
Well, I'm just saying, I just imagine you have a lot of free time in heaven. So you're just like, spend your time engaging in hobbies. And like, once, they get a whiff of Hamilton, you got like Thomas Jefferson and like Benjamin Franklin just like practicing their bars up there with Biggie and Tupac.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, let's forget like any sort of sense of like heaven or hell and just like the afterlife. Like whoever lets you in, presumably it's like a God figure or whatever, lets you in. And so you're good there, but then you have a secondary stage where the founding fathers of America come and chastise you. Isn't the God being like, hey, no, I let them in, they're cool.
Right.
But anyway.
And then I'd have a systemic critique of heaven to say, hey, did we vote democratically on these guys being able to have a microphone and perform?
I'm just happy to be there.
Yeah. You're a passenger.
I'd be like, hey,
it was touch and go.
I want to talk to like maybe loved ones that I lost in like Earth before I talk to Thomas Jefferson about
Did I make a wrong turn and is this actually hell?
I mean, who's recognized at Monticello?
You don't even get in unless you got a 16 bars to spit at John
Fresh
Adams.
God? Yeah. Well, I'm glad we fleshed out that scenario. Are you going to be talking about epic rap battles of history on the Discourse, Brandon?
I probably will. They're having like I don't want to promote other YouTube channels, and I don't listen to epic rap battles of history anymore. But I did see that they're on tour, so.
Oh my God! No, those things always never sat right with me. I don't like people
it's
dressing up.
It's the worst of the world. That's like chap rap. Did you ever see that where it's guys acting like they're from Edwardian England doing rap? Chap hop.
I'm not so down on it. I don't want to be like.
But your cringe tolerance is like of. I mean,
Brandon's headphones pull out.
Herculean proportions.
Brandon's headphones pull out, and like chap rap is playing.
Oh God!
Really loudly over the speaker.
24/7, like 2011 Boston like white rap circa like Sammy Adams is on the playlist.
Oh gosh.
some acapella rap covers from some
Pentatonics.
Exactly.
Oh gosh, I have a deep bench of memory for that. Anyway, what's happening though on the Discourse actually?
Well, we will be talking about obviously these incredibly disgusting anti-campus protest waves of violence being committed by the NYPD. We'll be talking about, the upcoming election. So, stay tuned. It's going to be pretty exciting.
All right. Well, we'll have Binder soon, I believe. The number is 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half.
You are in for it. All right, folks. 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half.
Are you ready?
Who sent us this?
Alpha males are back. Boy is back. And the alpha males are back.
Just as delicious as you could imagine.
The alpha males are back. Boy is back. And the alpha males are back.
Just wanna degrade the white man.
Alpha males are back.
I take all of it in my throat.
Alpha males are back.
Snowflakes has what?
The alpha males are back.
You are a madman.
And the alpha males are back.
Oh no, Sam Seder! What a fucking nightmare!
Bring back DJ Dinner.
Yeah, or a couple of them. Just put them in rotation.
DJ Dinner.
Well, the problem with those is they're like 45 seconds long, so I don't know if they're enough of a break.
That's fucking nonsense. You see white people doing drugs that look worse than normal white people, and all white people look disgusting.
And the alpha males,
psych, fuck them.
Snowflakes has what?
What?